And in this video, we're going to be learning about the order of operations. You may have learned some acronyms to remember the order of operations, something that starts with PE something. We're not going to use those in this video. We're going to actually talk about that at the very end. To get us started, though, let's take a look at this equation right here. Let's take a look at 4 plus 3 times 6. So one person might look at this and say, well, 4 plus 3 equals 7, and 7 times 6 equals 42. So one person might get the answer of 42. Another person might get the answer of 22. And so the problem is that there can only be one right answer to any sort of an equation. We can't have multiple answers to a single equation. We can have multiple ways of getting to that answer, but each equation has only one single answer, right? So one of these has to be the right answer. And that's where we get into the order of operations. We always start off with any grouping operations. Grouping operations are multiplication and division, and we go left to right. So it's not like we do multiplication first and then division. Rather, we're going to do whichever ones we come across working left to right, and then we're going to do our counting operations. Again, addition and subtraction working left to right. So when we have 4 plus 3 times 6, well, I'm going to look here first for any grouping operations, and I see some multiplication ones here, 3 times 6. So I'm going to cross out 3 times 6, and I'm going to replace that here in the bottom with 18. So my new problem is 4 plus, because that's the same, I haven't solved that yet, 4 plus 18. And now it's a lot easier for me to figure out 4 plus 18 is 22. So we always do the grouping operations first, multiplication and division, followed by our counting operations, addition and subtraction. And both of those, you start at the left side of the problem and you work your way over. So let's take a look at some other examples here. Let's try out 5 times 4 minus 8 divided by 2. So the first thing I need to do is look for my grouping operations, multiplication and division going left to right. So I've got 5 times 4. 5 times 4 is 20. And now any other grouping? I see division ones. 8 divided by 2. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So I've done my grouping operations. Now I need to look for my counting operations. That's addition and subtraction. And sure enough, there's just one bit of my counting operations left, my subtraction. So I'm going to move it down. 20 minus 4, which equals 16. Let's try this next problem. 3 plus 7 times 6 minus 11. First is my grouping operations, multiplication and division. That's right over here. 7 times 6. Well, 7 times 6, that's my favorite multiplication problem. I hope everyone knows that one. 7 times 6 equals 42. And so let's see, I'm looking any more grouping operations. I don't see them. So I'm now going to go on to my counting operations, addition and subtraction. So I'm just going to rewrite those here. 3 plus 42 minus 11. Now, again, here's the situation where I have to decide what do I do first. And that's why if we look back at our guide from before, we do our grouping operations left to right and our counting operations left to right. So I don't want you to think, ooh, we need to do addition first or subtraction first, but instead we're going to go left to right. So 3 plus 42 equals 45, and 45 minus 11 equals 34. You get the idea. Let's take a look at a few more. 3 plus 81 divided by 9 times 3 minus 17. We're getting a little bit more complicated now. So I see right over here, I've got a lot of my grouping operations, division and multiplication. So I go left to right. 81 divided by 9 is 9. And now I still have to do 9 times 3 because that's another grouping operation. 9 times 3 is 27. So I just took care of 81 divided by 9 times 3, and I was able to restate that as 27. So now I'm just going to bring down the rest. 3 plus 27 minus 17. And just as earlier we worked left to right, here we're going to work left to right as well. 3 plus 27 equals 30. 30 minus 17 equals 13. Let's take a look at this next one. 4 times 8 minus 12 plus 3 times 6. And eventually you start to get really good about just your eye jumping to multiplication and division problems first. So 4 times 8, we know 8 and 8 is 16, and 16 and 16 is 32. So I've got that part taken care of. And 3 times 6 equals 18. So I've got that covered. No more grouping strategies. Now let's take a look at my counting strategies. Let me bring down my minus 12 plus and see what we can come up with here. 32 minus 12 equals, sorry, I'm looking for a color I haven't used lately. 32 minus 12 equals 20. And now I've got 20 plus 18, which equals 38. So we always start with the grouping, and then we move to the counting. Let's take a look at a word problem, though, and you'll see that sometimes it gets a little bit more complicated. Steve had 16 candies. Steve got 16 candies when he went trick-or-treating. He dropped 2. When he returned home, he doubled his amount of candy by raiding his home's leftover supply. How many candies did he have? All right, so we know he got 16 candies when he went trick-or-treating. So I got 16 here. But then he dropped 2. But then when he got home, we know that he doubled his amount of candy. So that's now times 2 by reading his home supply. So we have to figure out what our answer is to this. What's the correct solution? Well, if I'm using the order of operations, I'm going to say 2 times 2 equals 4, and 16 minus 4 equals 12, that he had 12 pieces of candy. There's just one problem. That's not the right answer. I mean, heck, if he got, let's just think about this and step away from the equation. He had 16 pieces of candy. He dropped 2 of them. So he had 14. When he got home, he doubled them. That should be 28. But when I'm doing this, I know that I start with my multiplication. That's 2 times 2 equals 4. 16 minus 4 equals 12. 16 minus 4 equals 12. I'm not getting the right answer, even though I'm doing the correct math. And here's why. This is a situation where we need to break the rule of the order of operations. And really, we're not breaking the rule. We're using another piece of it. Because there's a step in the order of operations that comes before grouping. It comes before counting, and it is parentheses. Parentheses are the punctuation marks like you just saw me draw, and they say do anything inside of these parentheses first using these rules. So for example, here I need to first do my 16 minus 2. I need to do that part first. 16 minus 2 equals 14. And I have 14 times 2. 14 times 2 equals 28. My parentheses told me to do that part first in order to get the answer. And here's a perfect example of why you need to do that at times. So if you take a look here at these 2 problems here, we know that we're going to start off with 8 plus 6. 8 plus 6 equals 14. So now I have 14 times 2 minus 5. Now I've taken care of everything in the parentheses, so I go back to the usual order of operations. I'm going to do my grouping operations first. 14 times 2 equals 28. And now I'm left with 28 minus 5. And that's going to equal 23. And if we look at this problem on the right here, oh boy, we've got a lot in here. Well, I know I have to do all this stuff first, but what do I do first? Well, I have to decide, am I going to do a grouping operation or a counting operation? Grouping comes first. 5 times 9 equals 45. 45 minus 6. Well, I know that 45 minus 6 equals 39. So now I have 39, and I'm going to bring down all my other stuff here. 39 minus 2 times 5. Well, 39 minus 2. Oh, and here's the situation where I just made, you know what? I almost got myself mixed up. I almost said that 39 minus 2 equals 37, and 37 times 5 is frankly a skill we haven't learned yet in 4th grade. But I'd be breaking the order of operations. What do I do here first? I almost just made a mistake, but I caught it. We all make those good mistakes as long as we can find them and fix them. I have to first do my grouping operations. 2 times 5 equals 10. And this is a lot easier for us to do in 4th grade. 39 minus 10, which equals 29. So I've shown you a bunch of different examples of how order of operations works. You may have seen this before, and I started to mention that at the beginning. PEMDAS, some people call it PEMDAS, some people call it please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, but we know the real way to say it is please excuse my dear Aunt Sue. The truth is, though, we don't use that, and I really, really discourage people from using this strategy, and here's why. First of all, in our grade, we don't even talk about exponents. So now you can't even say it. PMDAS, that doesn't even sound good. We talked about starting with parentheses, but when you write multiplication before division, it makes people think that you do multiplication first and division after. And then you do the addition, and then you do the subtraction. And that's just plain untrue. If we were going with that strategy, I'd do 24 divided by 6 and get the answer of 4. And then I'd be doing my addition, 1 plus 2 equals 3. And then I'd have to subtract that. 4 minus 3 equals 1. And that's not the right answer. Rather, if I rewrite this quickly, 24 divided by 6 minus 1 plus 2, I am correct about starting out with 24 divided by 6. That's 4. But now I just go in order, left to right. There's no reason why I would ever do addition before subtraction. We always go left to right. So 4 minus 1 equals 3, plus 2 equals 5. So as far as I'm concerned, PEMDAS, PEMDAS, please excuse my dear aunt, whatever you want to call it, we're not going to use that anymore. It confuses kids more than it helps them. And really, the best way to help a 4th grader to understand the proper order of operations is using this strategy. Parentheses, grouping operations, and counting operations. It may not be a nice, pretty name that you can remember quite as easily, but once you build that understanding, it's going to really pay off for you in the long run. This has been Mr. Moss showing you how order of operations works at the 4th grade level, and I hope this was a helpful guide for you. Have a great day.